Okay, so I also did want to kind of point out, just to break up kind of where we're at. I am not going to pretend that I am more of an expert than your author. Your author has loads of experience and resources and research into this topic. My questioning revolves around what we know from the archaeological data and what possibly could have been messed up through contact and change, right? So those tend to be more my kind of analysis. And again, to get you guys to be more in the world of analysis rather than past judgments, if I read this book kind of cover to cover, ultimately what I could say at the end of it is that everybody was warring, right? Which I don't actually believe was the way that a lot of these people lived, okay? And also this mixed kind of message of women and men were equal. And actually in this section, it talks about how women and men were equal. But then at the last sentence of the paragraph, it says that women had less prestige. And the going definition for prestige is cultural value. If they are equal in all of these things, how do they have less cultural value? And what if there was a woman chief? Would that still be true? So for me, what it is I feel like sometimes the book, and a lot of anthropology does this, creates this world of binary ideas which are these people were this way. And then it goes back and talks about the gray area stuff, which is, oh, there were women chiefs. Okay? Oh, but they were less prestigious in society. If there was a woman chief, women would not have been less prestigious in society. They would have been more prestigious in society. So the gray area is not necessarily well connected, and that's what I'm trying to do. Okay, I am not questioning the author in terms of information, right? I have not. My focus in my own research has not totally been on Native Americans. I've done a lot of it in terms of archaeology and stuff like that, but this is not what I'm trying to do. I'm also trying to get you guys to kind of think outside of the words that are printed into a text, right? So the division of labor one was an interesting one, and I have you guys discuss this in the discussion board for the week, and I think it brings up good kind of discussions. Can you be less prestigious and equal at the same time, right? In my mind, those are hard things to do. It means that you have less cultural value if you're less prestigious. But can you be equal? Well, doesn't cultural value have some kind of share in the equality spectrum, right? And really, this is, obviously, you guys are getting a ton of kind of Mr. Griffin debate in terms of anthropology and whatnot. And again, I love the field. I am what it is, but where I spend a lot of my time and analysis is in that gray area, right? Let's have a conversation about what this looks like, and not just kind of point out this is what things were and this is what the missionaries saw and this is what I'm reporting, right? Is what is kind of being done here. Marriages were arranged, especially the first one. Okay, so the first marriage was arranged. There were gifts that were given. If you didn't like your arrangement that your parents had created, eloping was okay. So you could just run off with the love of your life. Divorce was simply moving out. And again, what you can see here by the marriage structure is that these monogamous marriage structures tend to be more fluid than what we've been used to in America in terms of law and the process, right? Literally moving out equals divorce. Okay? Now, I know plenty of people in my life right now that are in the process of divorcing, but it's probably going to take them 5 years. Okay. However, they don't live with each other anymore. So in this situation, they would have already been divorced, right? In a legal kind of social acknowledgement setting. Okay. The dead were buried or cremated. If your spouse or loved one, your married partner basically died, you would have to mourn for a year and then kind of give up those symbolic connections to that individual, and then you could get remarried after that. Okay. Economics, seasonal hunting rounds were important. Hunting and fishing were big. Obviously, I kind of named the animals before. In the winter months, groups would break into smaller groups. Again, you didn't have a lot of activity during this time. However, when I say activity, I mean hunting, gathering, those kinds of things. I shouldn't have said activity. What they did have is a bunch of leisure activity, right? Which is, what would you do if you were trapped in a small village camp or a house for the winter months, right? And you were trapped there with your family, okay? I know that I've felt trapped with my family before, and what we end up doing is playing games, singing songs, dancing. Those kinds of things are what happened, right? Fish and fish roe were a staple, especially salmon, okay? Weirs, fishing weirs, this is a picture, an example of a fishing weir. So they would set up these wood, basically channels, right, traps, that would then funnel all of the fish into this cavern or separate little area, like a little room, and then you could then you would just go spear them or catch them or net them or pull them out, right? Because you've congregated all the fish into this one area, and it's because they're swimming upstream, downstream, whichever they're going, but they're basically being trapped into these corrals. Basically, it's a fish corral, and very efficient. Not a lot of work. Look. If we were in a tribe of 26, which is in the class, 27 with me, we could build that fishing weir in a couple hours, okay, in terms of cutting down, stripping wood, right, setting it up, tying it together, and literally within a few more hours, we could have enough fish for a month, because then we could smoke it and it would be done, okay? Very easy work. Anywhere in the Northwest where salmon runs and this area where fish played a primary role in their diet. Again, they wouldn't necessarily take out the fish that were pregnant or spawning at certain times. They knew that they had to maintain that equilibrium with nature in order to have continual food. Okay, they ate 135 different plant species. And again, I think I mentioned a lot of those already. Wild carrot, wild onion, camas, and some of those other things. Tubers, acorns, pine nuts, very, very important. I think I touch on them in the next slide. Trade was essential, and the book again talks about trading horses and slaves. And if we look at prior to 1720-ish, we had no horses, and the big question is, did we have slaves? Remember, the big debate for me is if Native Americans did not have private property, they would not have had slaves either, okay, which is a form of property. And again, this slaves and property tend to come along with other property, correct? If I own a horse now, having a slave as property is kind of a continuation of that. Now, I'm not saying in any way it's right, because that's not actually true in any way. But again, the private property idea, right? And slavery being kind of thrown into this as a form of trade brings up some interesting concepts, and again would make me question whether or not these people prior to kind of 400 years ago, did they have slaves or not? And that would be, again, we need a time machine. But if they didn't have the horse and they didn't have private property and they were more banned kind of moving around, would you need slaves? Again, slavery tends to also coincide with people who are more agricultural or sedentary, where they have they're building structures and they're using labor in some way. Remember, if we're moving around, there's no reason for that, right? We're kind of self-sufficient in that way. Material culture, this is a semi-subterranean pit house. This is an example. You would dig out in the dirt, maybe even build it out of cedar, but big wood, and then you would cover it up with dirt too, just so that you had the walls kind of covered. Sweat houses were also important. Again, these are part of the village, and they would be houses that they would start fires and kind of create, obviously, an environment that was very hot, and natives would sweat it out. They would go jump in the river after that. It was kind of a cleansing element. Communal ceremonial structures were also part of the plateau people. Summer houses were more long houses, very long, where, again, it would be more communal. So bigger houses meant that we could have more people in it and we could eat food together and those kinds of things. After the mid-1700s, they adopt teepees. Fascinating. Again, this group did not have teepees prior to the 1700s, and the introduction of the horse and more plains natives kind of moving in and influencing as well. Teepees were not a universal, even though that most kind of generalized ideas around how natives lived was that they all lived in teepees, right? They used dugout canoes, more for kind of travel and trade. Fishing was done more with the weirs, right? Your basic kind of in the river blockade system and nets. So dugout canoes were more for travel. Bow and arrow was the hunting technology that these groups have. Stone tools were made from obsidian, and again, obsidian is kind of a natural black glass that is created through volcanic activity. Baskets in this area were very, very important, and they used different plant material for this. And they were used for obviously carrying things around, cooking, and different plants were used for making these baskets. Very intricate and very a big part of their material culture as well. Religion. Okay. The religion was an interesting one. And again, for me, I wonder how much this changed over time and became what it is because of things like the horse. Okay. Their religion, by the way, this is a field of kamas, which are kind of a type of tuber, right? Beautiful flowers on top, but basically the harvest would provide a ton of carbohydrates in the way of tubers and bulbs. The religion emphasized the relationship between the individual and the supernatural, and the vision quest and puberty ceremonies were very individualistic, and it's really at a personal level. For me, being somebody who's studied religion for a long time, what are the implications of a personal individualized relationship with the supernatural or religious ideology? Again, humans tend to be very symbolic in nature. So if we, prior to the horse, we would have been much more communal, walking around together, right? All of us walking to the next place. We had one form of transportation, and it was an equalizer. We all had to walk there or run. But once the horse came in, right, now we were riding around. Who could ride around? Maybe somebody with more status or prestige. Now we had wealth because we have private property. We can trade things like horses. And did that have any implications into creating more of this individualized religion? Or did the plateau people always have this individualized relationship with religion? Okay, these are kind of the big questions, right? The other piece is, again, 85 years of contact with missionaries and Lewis and Clark, right? I guess it was only kind of 60 maybe years of missionaries prior. But once you have that, religion, especially in the Christianity sense, becomes much more individualized as well and less community-oriented. Shamans were focused on curing illness and treating injury and maintaining health. Okay? There were large-scale ceremonies, and one of the ones that they talk about in your book is first fruit ceremonies. And they talk about the kamas harvest and the salmon harvest, the first catches or the first harvest. So these would have been big food festivals and big food ceremonies, and very, very important as a communal group, right, to give thanks and whatnot. But generally, this group really is focused on the individual and their relationship with the supernatural. Okay, the plateau natives today, 10 reservations, 407 reserves, high unemployment rate, poor health, alcoholism. The big debate is fishing rights with this group. Many plateau natives are Christian and speak English. Washat, which is the Seven Drum religion, is a syncretized version of the native religion blended with Christianity. Again, a lot of times this is a way of kind of surviving, keeping your religion alive, because it appeases maybe the missionaries that are a little bit more harsh in the area, but also maintains a connection to your past. That's the functional standpoint. The other is that sometimes these groups had similar enough beliefs that they just blended together and worked for them, right? The Sundance, Native American Church, and Feather Cult are all also groups where these individuals could join or be a part of as well. Okay, so natives, again, struggling with unemployment, poor health, alcoholism, land rights, fishing rights, water rights, those kinds of things tend to come up as well. and they've been fighting with having treaties and whatnot for a long